It's my favourite time of the day. Absolutely. It's time for Talking Pints. I'm joined by Neil Wallis. Neil, great to see you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoy
All the
it.
very best. Now, you've been a veteran newspaperman. Newspaper's been your work in life for decades.
Mean I'm old?
No. Mature, I think,
mature.
is the term that we would
Yes.
use. You've had a fascinating career in newspapers. You're still involved, obviously, in media advice and things like that. Now, you started the hard way, the traditional way that people used to start in newspapers, out there working for local newspapers, and I guess what's that sort of covering court stories and that sort of thing?
Quite literally, when I started on the Skegness Standard, before moving to the heights of the Worksop Guardian.
Well, there you are.
Amongst the first jobs I ever did was standing outside a funeral, taking the names as they went in and out of everybody attending. And the biggest mistake you ever made, and you never did it twice, is to leave someone's name out.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Of course, but local papers then really mattered, didn't they?
Totally. I live a lot of my time now in Cornwall, and the local papers down there are still very powerful.
Western Morning News and all the rest of it.
That's the big regional paper.
Right.
But papers like the West Briton, they are very strong, powerful newspapers still. And how they do it, you know what they do? They've got an identity. They know the Cornish identity. And that's the great thing with newspapers. You've got to know who you're talking to.
And that applies...
Just like you as a politician.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, on a good day. And I guess that's the same whether it's online or in print, yeah?
Yeah, I think that it's... I think the move online has diluted the personality of newspapers, as did, incidentally, we may talk about it later, but the aftermath of the hacking scandal, the Levesoning, all of that has damaged the character of newspapers. But I've got to tell you, what a life to live, being a national newspaper man in this country. Fantastic.
Yeah, and you spent some years going all over the world.
All over the world.
Conflict zones, and finished up in hospital in Northern Ireland. And
that's true, yeah.
And I mean,
I got tear gassed in well, didn't really matter. It was, big riot going on. And then I made the mistake of stumbling around the corner. They'd set fire to one of the armoured trucks, and the burning leather on top of tear gas. It's not a good way to spend your day.
No. You've got to be brave to be a journalist, haven't you?
I don't know whether brave's the right word. You have to be committed. You have to believe in what you're doing, and it's a trade, not a profession, but it's a trade you've got to be absolutely devoted to. And if you love it, then it's in you. And my lady, Susan, would say, on my tomb will be the word journalist.
Yeah,
That's
clearly.
That's all
clearly.
it needs.
What did you make of our brave souls in northern France over the last couple of days?
I said to Mark when he came out, it was terrific. It was terrific. And that's what, unfortunately, newspaper finances have been so badly damaged by the internet, really crippled newspapers. But actually, the only way you get stories is go to the story.
Yeah.
I used to be called what was called a fireman. So a phone call. I was down the pub, actually.
Well, that was, but in your days, I mean, Fleet Street, isn't that what people did? I mean, quite a lot.
Yeah. There's an earthquake in Italy. There's been a dam collapse. And I just dived in a cab. Somebody met me at the airport, because you always had your passport with you.
Yeah.
Give you some money. Getting over there was a car waiting. I finally got there, rang in, because it was before the days of mobile phones. And they said, yes, that's all good news. Incidentally, your wife rang in to say, when will you be home, because the dinner party starts at 8.
We forget about a world without mobile phones.
That is so true.
And connectivity and...
It's transformed everything, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And in some ways, what is a problem is the not having the downtime, I think, is important. Because you need to think about it. I've got friends who are, particularly in the TV world, they stopped being reporters, which they signed up for, and they just stand in front of a TV, of a camera, and they're broadcasting live, or they're on the internet, or they're on Twitter, and it never stops.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, I'm fascinated, Neil, that you, as you sort of ascended through the ranks in journalism, you finished up working at the Sun newspaper in the days when the editor of the newspaper was a man who sat in that seat, Kelvin MacKenzie, and did Talking Pints. And I put it to Kelvin. I said, you know, you really were a bit of a tyrant, weren't you, as editor? And he said, yes, and I loved it. I mean, how difficult was he?
He was a monster. I mean, he's a great friend of mine. But the thing with Kelvin was he was utterly committed. And he was committed to it and obsessed by it. And if you worked for him, you had to be as well, or you had to go. In fact, you couldn't survive, really, if you didn't have his level of commitment. But he was just one of the three greatest tabloid newspaper men there has been. Yeah. And the worst thing that ever happened when you got connectivity between a computer screen at home and the office. So even when he was off, and we actually got the techies to put something on in the system so it would come up and flash, so you knew that the damn man was sitting there reading the news wires while he was supposed to be off, when he was supposed to be in bed.
So he just couldn't leave it alone.
Couldn't leave it alone.
Yeah, and was hugely successful. Hugely successful,
yeah. And just a talent bomb. He just thought headlines, ideas, and once upon a time he'd been on my back. I was head of features, I think, at Sun at this stage, and he told me off for. I'll use that word. He told me off.
Using sort of peppered with Anglo-Saxon.
Yes, that's it. Because he didn't like the ideas or whatever, and I said to him in despair, Kelvin, I can't work any harder. And he looked at me and paused and he said, I don't want you to work hard, I want you to work better.
Yeah.
Collapse of stout party.
Yeah, quite a good answer, actually.
Yeah, wasn't it?
Annoyingly. Yourself, Neil, you yourself, you edited The People and you went on ultimately to become executive editor of this incredible newspaper that had been around for 150 odd years, the News of the World. One of the biggest selling newspapers in the world.
Yes.
And one of the most powerful newspapers in the world. I mean, back then, did you realise just how much power you had over people's lives?
Yes, to be honest about it, and I think that anybody would be a liar if they didn't say that. Not just on the News of the World, that was probably the Sun under Kelvin was the most powerful newspaper around, that and the Daily Mail, Dacre's Daily Mail.
Yeah.
The News of the World incredibly powerful, even when I was the editor of The People. And in those days, it was a Labour supporting paper. I loyally followed the party line. I criticised a cabinet minister in the paper one Sunday. He was on the phone. His PA was on the phone the very next day to me at home. Would you have lunch with him on Tuesday, please? Obviously, we'll be paying. Cabinet ministers were all over you.
Yeah.
And that's because of the power and the reach that the newspapers had. The Sun at its height was selling over 4 million.
Yeah.
The News of the World was selling over 5 million.
Yeah.
And this was at a time, of course, when there was an explosion of popular culture. TV was exploding. Tabloid
Celebrity was growing.
Celebrity was the biggest growth industry in the Western world. And we answered that call.
But with that power does come responsibility.
Yes.
And the newspaper industry, through the hacking scandal, hey, I was hacked by News of the World, but I was one of them,
Yeah.
I wasn't very happy about it, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I promise to behave tonight, don't worry. But the newspaper industry, it was always known, around the world, the British press were among the toughest.
Yeah.
But, there we are, people accepted that. I think people in public life accepted it was rough. But they didn't accept hacking. They didn't accept what they saw as cheating. Before we talk about the News of the World and you, be honest, how widespread was this across the industry? The News of the World finished up being closed down.
Yeah.
How widespread was it in the other papers, in your view?
Well, it's been proven that it was common on the Sunday Mirror as well. It was something to do with the personnel who interchanged between these newspapers. I don't believe it was on the Sun. For instance, there's loads of people have desperately tried to link it to the Sun. I don't believe that happened. I carry no flag for the Sun or any other newspaper anymore. Particularly, I don't believe that most newspapers did it. Do you know why? Because it was a damn stupid thing to do, and I paid the price for it.
You did. I mean, you did. But I mean, others of your colleagues were found guilty.
Yeah,
of
and
this,
pleaded guilty.
And pleaded guilty. Yeah. And Coulson, etc. You know, went to prison over it.
Yeah.
You, as deputy editor and then executive editor, you pleaded not guilty.
Yes.
And in fact, they came after you some years after, I think, didn't they?
Well, yes, they did. I left newspapers when I was in about 2009, and about 2 years later, they suddenly raided me in my house at literally 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. By that time, I'd been long out of newspapers. I was a managing director of a celebrity reputation management firm, and they came after me. Yeah.
You finish up at the Old Bailey, but you unanimously, the jury say, not guilty.
Yeah.
But you must have known about others at the News of the World that were doing this.
I did afterwards, after the initial arrests. You know, because how it worked was that they arrested 2 guys while we were still there, and they were busted and went to prison. And it was the classic of Pandora's box, in the sense that you realised the sort of guys they were, and as this investigation continued and more stuff come out, you're sort of sitting there and thinking, how did this happen? Because it was nuts. And you know, the danger of doing it was always self-evident. And the industry paid the price, the News of the World in particular.
Yeah, the News of the World. I mean, you were found not guilty, of course, I repeat, unanimously, but took a hell of a toll on you and your family and everybody, because it does, doesn't it? Well,
it does. The worst thing for me was that they arrested me and then kept me on bail for 4 years. And, you know, it cost me my marriage, it cost me my, you know, a tremendous amount. But you know, you're a survivor of these things, not a victim. And I had my moments of justification, if you like, when I stood in that dock at the Old Bailey, where murderers, terrorists, paedophiles had stood, and they had a member of the press standing there that had been hounding for 4 years. And those guys, they were asked by the judge, guilty or not guilty? And they said, not guilty. And I walked out of there 4 years later after it started, and thank you very much.
We finished up, Neil, with Leveson. We finished up with the sort of different rules of engagement.
Yes.
We've talked already about the fundamental change to online and the fact papers have lost a bit of their character and personality. Do you think, post-Leveson, we've got the relationship right now between public figures and the media?
I don't really, because I think it was a very healthy thing that politicians in particular, and anybody in power, in a position of power, looked over their shoulder nervously at what the press might be sniffing around them. I don't think they have that fear now. When I was in national newspapers, a very regular thing would be the latest scandal coming from over there. Whether it's a sex scandal, a money scandal, there are far fewer of them anymore. When I was in newspapers for a very long time, they haven't changed their character. Trust me. It's all going on. But the problem is now they get away with it.
Well, you've made that case very strongly. Final thought. Would you advise a young man or a young woman to go into newspapers and journalism today? They're 18, they're 21, whatever. Is it still a great thing to do?
God, yes. What a fantastic career. What a fantastic career it is.
Great.
What an amazing thing to be able to go and ask questions. Follow your own curiosity. Turn over the stone, you know, and confront things and just explain things to ordinary people. Those people walking past down there and explaining to them, as you just did there with Mark White, as you guys were doing with that footage. You know, I say cheers to it as a game.
It's a great privilege. Thank you for coming on Talking Pies, Neil.
Cheers.
Neil
Good
Wallis.
Cornish beer.